The impact of a technology is so much greater on the civilization and the human condition than a non-technology that it's almost not worth your trouble to bother trying to fix things a conventional way. So let's take an example. I have a foundation, the Saylor Academy, and the Saylor Academy gives away free education, free college education to anybody on earth that wants it. And we've had more than 1 million students. And if you go and you take the physics class, the lectures were by the same physics lecturer that taught me physics at MIT. Except when I was at MIT, the cost of the first 4 weeks of MIT would have drained my family's collective life savings for the last 100 years.
Yeah.
Like 100 years worth of my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, they saved every penny they had after 100 years. They could have paid for 1 week or 2 weeks of MIT. That's how fiendishly expensive and inefficient it was. So yes. I went on scholarship. I was lucky to have a scholarship. But on the other hand, I sat in the back of the 801 lecture hall and I was like right up in the rafters. It's an awful experience on these like uncomfortable wooden benches and you can barely see the blackboard and you got to be there synchronously. And the stuff we upload, you can start it and stop it and watch it on your iPad or watch it on your computer and rewind it multiple times and sit in a comfortable chair and you can do it from anywhere on earth and it's absolutely free. So I think about this and I think, you want to improve the human condition? You need people with postgraduate level education. You need PhDs. And I know this sounds kind of elitist, but you want to cure cancer and you want to go to the stars, fusion drive. We need new propulsion, right? We need extraordinary breakthroughs in every area of basic science, be it biology or propulsion or materials science or computer science. You're not doing that with an undergraduate degree. You're certainly not doing it with a high school education. But the cost of a PhD is like $1 million. There's like 10 million PhDs in the world. If you if you check it out, there's 8 billion people in the world. How many people could get a PhD or would want to? Maybe not 8 billion, but 1 billion, 500 million. Let's just say 500 million to 1 billion. How do you go from 10 million to 1 billion highly educated people, all of them specializing in, and I don't have to tell you how many different fields of human endeavor there are. I mean, your life is interviewing these experts and there's so many, right? It's amazing. So how do I give a multi-million-dollar education to 1 billion people? And there's 2 choices. You can either endow a scholarship, in which case you pay $75,000 a year. Okay, $75,000. Let's pay $1 million and $1 million a person. I can do it that way. And you're never, even if you had $1 trillion, if you had $10 trillion to throw at the problem, and we've just thrown $10 trillion at certain problems, you don't solve the problem, right? If I put $10 trillion on the table and I said, educate everybody, give them all a PhD, you still wouldn't solve the problem. Harvard University can't educate 18,000 people simultaneously, or 87,000 or 800,000 or 8 million. So you have to dematerialize the professor and dematerialize the experience. So you put it all as streaming, on-demand, computer-generated education. And you create simulations where you need to create simulations, and you upload it. It's like the human condition is being held back by 500,000 well-meaning average algebra teachers. I love them. I mean, please don't take offense if you're an algebra teacher, but instead of 500,000 algebra teachers going through the same motion over and over again, what you need is like 1 or 5 or 10 really good algebra teachers, and they need to do it 1 billion times a day or 1 billion times a year for free. And if we do that, there's no reason why you can't give infinite education, certainly in science, technology, engineering, and math, right? Infinite education to everybody with no constraint. And I think the same is true, right? With just about every other thing. If you want to bring joy to the world, you need digital music. If you want to bring, enlightenment to the world, you need digital education. If you, want to bring anything of consequence in the world, you got to digitally transform it. And then you got to manufacture it something like 100 times more efficiently as a start, but 1,000,000 times more efficiently is probably that's hopeful. Maybe you have a chance. And if you look at all of these space endeavors and everything we're thinking about, getting to Mars, getting off the planet, getting to other worlds, number one thing you got to do is you got to make a fundamental breakthrough in an engine. People dreamed about flying for thousands of years, but until the internal combustion engine, you didn't have enough energy, enough power in a light enough package in order to solve the problem. And the human race has all sorts of those fundamental engines and materials and techniques that we need to master. And each one of them is a lifetime of experimentation of someone capable of making a seminal contribution to the body of human knowledge.
There's certain problems like education that could be solved through this process of dematerialization. And by the way, to give props to the 500K algebra teachers, when I look at YouTube, for example, one possible approach is each one of those 500,000 teachers probably had days and moments of brilliance. And if they had ability to contribute to in the natural selection process, like the market of education, where the best ones rise up, that's a really interesting way, which is like the best day of your life, the best lesson you've ever taught could be found and sort of broadcast to billions of people. So all of those kinds of ideas can be made real in the digital world. Now, traveling across planets, you still can't solve that problem with dematerialization. What you could solve potentially is dematerializing the human brain, where you can transfer, like you don't need to have astronauts on the ship. You can have a floppy disk carrying a human brain.
Touching on those points, you'd love for the 500,000 algebra teachers to become 500,000 math specialists, and maybe they clump into 50,000 specialties as teams, and they all pursue 50,000 new problems, and they put their algebra teaching on autopilot.
Yeah.
That's the same.
Yes.
That's the same as when I give you 11 cents worth of electricity, and you don't have to row a boat 8 hours a day before you can eat. Right?
Yes.
It would be a lot better, that you would pay for your food in the first 8 seconds of your day, and then you could start thinking about other things, right? With regard to technology, one thing that I learned studying technology, when you look at S-curves, is until you start the S-curve, you don't know whether you're 100 years from viability, 1,000 years from viability, or a few months from viability.
Mm-hmm.
So,
isn't that fun? That's so fun. The early part of the S-curve is so fun because you don't know.
In 1900, you could have got any number of learned academics to give you 10,000 reasons why humans will never fly, right? And in 1903, the Wright brothers flew. And by 1969, we're walking on the moon. So the advance that we made in that field was extraordinary. But for the 100 years and 200 years before, they were just back and forth and nobody was close. And that's the happy part. The happy part is we went from flying 20 miles an hour or whatever to flying 25,000 miles an hour in 66 years. The unhappy part is I studied aeronautical engineering at MIT in the 80s. And in the 80s, we had Gulfstream aircraft, we had Boeing 737s, we had the space shuttle. And you fast forward 40 years, and we pretty much had the same exact aircraft. The efficiency of the engines was 20, 30% more, right? we slammed into a brick wall around 69 to 75. Like, in fact, the Global Express, the Gulfstream, these were all engineered in the 70s, some in the 60s. The fuselage silhouette of a Gulfstream of a G5 was the same shape as a G4, is the same shape as a G3, is the same shape as a G2. And that's because they were afraid to change the shape for 40 years because they worked it out in a wind tunnel. They knew it worked. And when they finally decided to change the shape, it was like a $10 billion exercise with modern supercomputers and computational fluid dynamics.
Why was it so hard? What is that wall made of that you slammed into?
The right question is, so why does a guy that went to MIT that got an aeronautical engineering degree spend his career in software? Why is it that I never a day in my life, with the exception of some Air Force Reserve work, I never got paid to be an aeronautical engineer, and I worked in software engineering my entire career.
Well, maybe software engineering is the new aeronautical engineering in some way. Maybe you hit fundamental walls until you have to return to it centuries later. Or no?
The National Gallery of Art was endowed by a very rich man, Andrew Mellon. And you know how he made his money? Aluminum. Okay? And so, you know what kind of airplanes you can create without aluminum?